Emily was excited. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, filling the space with a soft and welcoming light. The smell of roasted chicken mingled with the fresh aroma of herbs she had cut minutes earlier. It was a perfect Saturday to host friends, and she was eager to share a special moment with them, especially with David, her husband. As she stirred the salad, her thoughts wandered to how balanced and happy life seemed. Her marriage to David, a charismatic and successful man, was one of the pillars that supported her happiness. "I hope they arrive soon," Emily thought, glancing at the clock on the wall. She had taken great care to prepare everything with love, from the elegantly set table to the dessert that, though simple, was always a success. A touch of nervousness crept in, but it was the good kind, the kind that precedes moments of joy. When the doorbell rang, her heart raced. With a smile on her face, Emily ran to the door. When she opened it, she was greeted by David, who had arrived late. He was holding a bouquet of fresh flowers with vibrant colors, brightening the atmosphere even more. "For you, my dear," he said, handing her the flowers. Emily smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. David always knew how to make her days more special. "You're an incurable romantic, you know?" she joked, as she placed the flowers in a vase on the living room table. "Come on, the friends will be here soon." The house soon filled with laughter and conversation. Emily's friends were a mix of couples and singles, all very close. The atmosphere was light and relaxed. Emily watched David interact with the friends, his laughter echoing easily, his charismatic presence lighting up the space. It was easy to understand why people admired him. During lunch, the conversations flowed naturally, and the topic of relationships came up. Sarah, a longtime friend of Emily's, commented on a recent breakup of mutual friends. "Sometimes it's hard to believe what happens behind closed doors," she said with a tone of dismay. Emily nodded, but felt a slight discomfort in her stomach. "Yes, it seems trust is a fragile thing," she replied, trying to keep the tone light. "Who would have thought that people who seem so happy could be going through that?" The conversation continued, and the friends began sharing stories about betrayals and romantic disappointments. Emily listened, but her attention drifted to David, who was chatting and laughing with Sarah. For a brief moment, a shadow of insecurity crossed her heart. He seemed so at ease, so close to her. Why this strange feeling now? Emily thought, trying to shake off the doubt. Then, amidst the laughter and anecdotes, a friend casually mentioned the name Amelia, a colleague of David's. The mention caused an instant change in David's expression. He stopped laughing, and his smile faltered for a second before returning to normal. Emily noticed, and her heart began to race. "What's going on?" she questioned herself, the insecurity growing inside her. "You know Amelia, don't you, David?" the friend asked, not noticing the tension in the air. "She had an affair with Mark, remember? It's a small world, isn't it?" David smiled, but there was something in his eyes that Emily couldn't decipher. "Yes, of course. A complicated story," he said, trying to keep the tone light, but the lightness from before had dissipated. Emily felt a lump in her throat. The conversation continued, but the once light atmosphere now seemed heavy. As the laughter echoed around her, Emily found herself lost in thought. What was really happening between David and Amelia? That small change in his expression, the way he avoided talking more about the colleague, everything seemed very suspicious. And though she tried to ignore it, a voice inside her whispered that something wasn't right. The lunch continued, but the lightness that had once filled the room was now mixed with a tension that Emily didn't know how to address. Emily was restless. The lunch with friends still echoed in her mind, especially the strange change in David's expression when he heard Amelia's name. What was so significant about that woman? To try to ease the pressure she felt, she decided to confront him. That night, while setting the table for dinner, she turned to him, who was sitting on the couch, fiddling with his phone. "David, can I ask you a question?" Emily's voice was a little shaky, and she struggled to stay calm. "Of course, love. What is it?" He looked up, an easy smile on his lips, but Emily noticed that his eyes quickly shifted back to the phone screen. "At that lunch, when they mentioned Amelia, you seemed, I don't know, different. What's going on with you and her?" Emily held her breath, hoping the question didn't sound too accusatory. David closed his phone and stood up, approaching her. "Amelia? "Oh, that was just a coincidence. I don't even know her well. She's just a colleague, I promise. It has nothing to do with us." His tone was calm, but Emily noticed a slight nervousness in his posture. "Are you sure? Because, well, it seemed like you were a bit uncomfortable." The insecurity grew inside her, but she tried to remain firm. "Love, you know I love you, don't you? There's no one else. Let's plan that trip we were talking about." David changed the subject with a skill that left Emily even more confused. Deep down, she wanted to believe him, but doubt consumed her. "Yes, of course, the trip." She smiled, but the joy didn't reach her eyes. In the days that followed, she tried to ignore her intuitions, focusing on the details of the trip. Hotel reservations, sightseeing itineraries, packing lists. It was an effort, a way to create a world where the happiness of before still existed. While organizing the suitcases, Emily looked at David's phone, which was on the table. An impulse led her to pick up the device. The unread message flashed on the screen. She hesitated, her heart racing. What could be there that justified her unease? But deep down, her trust in her husband still prevented her from opening that message. "He wouldn't do that to me," she thought, trying to find comfort in her own trust. On the morning of the trip, anxiety and anticipation were high. Emily woke up early, eager to spend quality time with David. But instead of the romantic breakfast she had imagined, she was surprised by a text message from David. He had canceled the trip due to an unexpected work commitment. Her world collapsed in an instant. "David, you can't be serious. We've been planning this for weeks." The frustration and disappointment were evident in Emily's voice. I know, but an important meeting came up and I can't miss it. It's a work issue." David seemed genuinely concerned, but the expression on his face didn't convince her. Something inside her said there was more to the story. "And when will you have time for us?" Emily asked, her voice choked. "Is this more important than our plans? I promise we'll reschedule. I just need to deal with this first." His words sounded empty, echoing in a void that was growing inside her. After the conversation, Emily sat on the couch, looking out the window. The day was sunny, but her soul seemed shrouded in dark clouds. She wondered if she should investigate further. Something was wrong, and the decision to ignore her intuitions seemed increasingly unwise. What do I really know about David? The question haunted her, and she realized she needed answers, even if it meant uncovering painful truths. With a tumultuous mind, Emily decided she wouldn't let herself be carried away any longer. Something was forming inside her, a burning desire to uncover the truth. Whatever was hidden needed to be revealed, no matter how painful it was. She was determined to discover the real reason for the trip's cancellation, even if it led her down a dark path. Emily walked the streets of her city with a racing heart and a mind filled with confused thoughts. Since she had decided to follow David, each step felt like an unbearable weight on her shoulders. It was a sunny afternoon, but the sunlight offered no comfort. She remembered the shared laughs, the moments that seemed perfect, and the pain of betrayal consumed her. The idea that David might be meeting with Amelia, a colleague he had always mentioned with enthusiasm, made her feel as if she was being repeatedly stabbed. After a while, Emily spotted David's car parked in front of a charming cafe. With her heart in her throat, she hid behind a bush. Anxiety dominated her, but she knew she needed to know the truth. She watched as he entered the cafe, his confident posture and charming smile on display. Emily remembered how much she loved that smile, but now it seemed like a symbol of betrayal. As she waited, she tried to organize her thoughts. What if he's just meeting with friends? What if I'm being paranoid? But the image of David laughing and chatting with Amelia haunted her. After what felt like hours, she saw Amelia enter the cafe. It was as if the world around her stopped. The woman wore a red dress that accentuated her curves, and her walk exuded confidence. Emily felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over her. Inside the cafe, David and Amelia sat together, laughing and sharing a moment that seemed far too intimate. Emily couldn't hear what they were saying, but David's expression said a lot. The way he tilted his head to listen to Amelia, how his eyes sparkled with genuine interest, made her feel invisible. The pain in her heart turned into a burning anger, and at the same time, a deep sadness. With difficulty, she walked away from the cafe, feeling something inside her breaking. At home, The tension grew with every minute. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea she had prepared, but barely had the courage to touch. The scene she had witnessed was still fresh in her mind, and the desire to confront David consumed her. Finally, after hours of torment, she decided she needed to talk to him. When David arrived, he seemed relaxed and carefree, as if nothing was happening. Emily watched him, her heart pounding wildly. He greeted her with a quick kiss and a smile. "Hi, love. How was your day?" David asked, not noticing the approaching storm. "I saw you today," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. The tension in the air was palpable. David frowned, the carefree expression slowly disappearing. "What do you mean?" "At the cafe, with Amelia," she replied, her voice rising as frustration took over. "What were you doing there?" He hesitated, and that was enough for Emily to understand that her suspicions were correct. "It's not what it seems, Emily. I was just talking about work. You know we have projects together." "Talking about work?" Emily repeated, disbelief evident in her tone. "David, I saw how you two were. Don't try to fool me." The tension increased with each second, and David, realizing he couldn't escape, began to stammer. I promise there's nothing between us. You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" Emily was on the verge of exploding. "Look, I just want to know the truth. Do you love Amelia?" "Of course not," he practically shouted, but the uncertainty in his gaze said otherwise. "I love you, Emily. I've always loved you. Then why can't you look me in the eyes when you say that?" She noticed how he averted his gaze, confirming her suspicions. Desperate for concrete proof, Emily decided she needed to find the truth for herself. The conversation wasn't leading anywhere. She needed to discover the truth on her own, and as she looked at David, an idea formed in her mind. "I'm going to find out the truth," she said, surprising herself with the determination in her voice. "I can't live like this, with doubts." David looked at her, worry now etched on his face. "Emily, you don't have to do this. Trust me." "I can't trust you, David. Not now. I need to know once and for all." With those words, Emily knew she was on a path from which there would be no return. The pain of betrayal would lead to a final confrontation, and she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Emily looked in the mirror, the reflection of her own face showing a mix of determination and despair. Amelia's birthday party was about to begin, and she had decided she needed to know the truth. Wearing a black dress that made her look like a shadow in the night, she prepared for what could be a painful confrontation. Emily had hidden in a corner of the room, her cell phone camera ready, as the guests began to arrive. The loud music and laughter filled the air, but all she felt was a knot in her stomach. When David entered, her heart raced. He was wearing a radiant smile, and Emily wondered how many times that smile had been reserved for her. "Look who came!" Amelia exclaimed, pulling him in for a tight hug. Emily felt a wave of nausea, but kept the camera in position, watching every movement, every interaction. The vibrant atmosphere seemed like a cruel contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Minutes dragged by, and Emily recorded every laugh, every intimate glance between David and Amelia. The pain intensified, but she was determined to capture the betrayal in action. At one point, David leaned in to whisper something in Amelia's ear, and she let out a loud laugh, the same one Emily once found charming. "You're so funny, David," she said, with a sparkle in her eyes that made Emily's stomach churn. The party continued, and each interaction seemed to cut deeper. Emily couldn't move, trapped between the need to expose the betrayal and the desire to run and hide. Her fingers trembled as she held the camera, but determination was stronger than fear. She knew she needed to act, needed to put an end to the suffering. Eventually, the moment she both feared and expected arrived. David raised a glass, catching everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast to our birthday girl, Amelia," he declared, and the room fell silent. "You deserve all the love and happiness in the world. I'm so glad to have you in my life." Those words were like a punch in the stomach to Emily. What she was about to do could not be undone. She rose from her hiding place, still holding the camera. "David!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the festive atmosphere like a knife. All eyes turned to her, and the party instantly stopped. David stared at her, his eyes wide in shock. "Emily, what are you doing here?" he asked, the confidence in his voice quickly disappearing. Amelia also looked, her expression of surprise turning into confusion. "I'm here to expose the truth," Emily responded, her voice trembling but firm. "You can't keep living this lie, David. Everyone here needs to know what's really happening." The guests began murmuring, the tension in the room rising. "What are you talking about?" David tried to remain calm, but the nervousness was evident. "Emily, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like," Emily interrupted, her pain now overflowing into anger. "You're here, making a toast to your mistress, while I was just a shadow in your life. I saw how you two looked at each other, how you touched her. It's shameful." Amelia, still stunned, tried to speak. "Emily, I didn't know you were here. This isn't what you think." "I saw everything, Amelia," Emily exclaimed, pointing to the camera. "And now everyone here will see it too." With a press of a button, she started playing the video, where the images of David and Amelia exchanging laughs and intimate touches echoing through the room. The guests' reactions ranged from shock to compassion, but most were clearly horrified. David tried to approach her, but Emily took a step back. "Don't come near me. You broke the trust we built over years in an instant." Tears streamed down her face, but instead of weakness, it was a release. "I deserve more than this." The room began to grow chaotic. People whispered to each other, some looking with pity, others clearly uncomfortable. David, in a last-ditch effort to defend himself, said, "Emily, I love you. This was a mistake." "Love isn't betrayal, David. You don't love anyone. You only love yourself," she replied, her heart heavy but her mind clear. "Now I need to leave." As she walked away, the room divided between those who tried to comfort David and those who approached Emily, offering words of support. She didn't want to hear anything more. What once seemed like her perfect life was now crumbling, and for the first time in a long time, there was a glimpse of freedom. With each step she took toward the exit, Emily felt she was leaving behind not just a man, but also the pain that came with him. She was determined to seek her own happiness without looking back. Emily was in her new apartment, surrounded by still unpacked boxes, but she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the white walls she planned to fill with vibrant colors. Since the day she had the courage to leave David, her life seemed to have taken an unexpected turn, almost as if the pain of betrayal had opened a door to new possibilities. In the days following her move, Emily decided to sign up for painting classes. It was an old dream, something she had always wanted to do but had been set aside in favor of the demands of a marriage that now seemed so distant. On the first day of class, she entered the room with a mix of nervousness and excitement. The smell of fresh paint and the soft sound of brushes moving over the canvas welcomed her in a comforting way. It was there that she met Jake. He was a sensitive artist with disheveled hair and a way of speaking that immediately charmed her. During the class, Jake encouraged her to experiment with different techniques, always praising her attempts, even when they didn't turn out as expected. "Art is about expressing yourself, not about being perfect," he said, smiling in a friendly way. Emily felt something warm inside her with those words. As the weeks passed, their friendship blossomed. Jake became not just a mentor, but also a confidant. They talked about their lives, their aspirations, and gradually, Emily began to open her heart, revealing the scars left by her relationship with David. "You know, I never thought I would have the courage to leave someone who seemed so perfect," she confessed one day, while mixing paints on her palette. "But now, I feel like I'm finally finding myself." Jake listened attentively, his eyes reflecting understanding. Sometimes, perfection is just a mask. The important thing is that you're allowing yourself to be who you really are, without the pressure to please anyone, he replied, with a touch of sincerity that made her feel stronger. Emily began to explore her creativity more intensely, dedicating herself to painting as a form of therapy. She painted the emotions she couldn't express in words, each brushstroke freeing her a little more from the shackles of the past. And with each new work, she felt more empowered, closer to who she really was. One day, as she prepared for a local art exhibition, Emily was nervous. It was the first time she would show her paintings to the public, and the idea of being judged made her uneasy. Jake noticed her anxiety and said, "Remember, Emily, art is an extension of you. Don't worry about what others think. What matters is how you feel when creating." With those words echoing in her mind, Emily stepped onto the small gallery stage, her works hanging on the white walls, each one telling part of her journey. She took a deep breath and looked at the audience, who watched her with anticipation. As soon as she started talking about her inspirations, confidence took over her, and her passion for art became evident. In the middle of the exhibition, while talking to some people, the door suddenly opened and David entered. Emily's heart raced, and a wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. She hadn't seen him since the party, and his gaze pierced her like a knife. He approached, trying to appear casual, but his eyes betrayed the tension between them. "Emily, I wanted to talk to you," David began, his voice hesitant. She crossed her arms, trying to stay calm. "About what, David? About how you broke the trust we built?" Her tone was firm, and the pain that had once dominated her had now turned into determination. "I know I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I miss you," he said, trying to get closer. "Fix it? David, you don't understand. What you did isn't something that can be fixed. It's something I need to overcome to move forward," she replied, her voice filled with clarity and strength. David's gaze filled with despair, but Emily didn't hesitate. She was ready to move on, to embrace the new life she was building with effort and courage. With one last defiant look, she walked away from him, feeling stronger than ever. At that moment, she knew she had left behind not just David, but also all the insecurities that the relationship had imposed on her. The future was now hers, and she was determined to live it fully. The sun shone brightly over the city, but the atmosphere around Emily was charged with tension. David, who had tried to manipulate the situation after the revelation of his betrayal, was now trying to tarnish Emily's reputation, spreading malicious rumors among friends and acquaintances. He imagined that by discrediting Emily, he could reverse the situation and present himself as the victim of the story. However, he underestimated the strength and determination of the woman he had deceived. In a conversation at a cafe, Jake, the artist who had become Emily's friend, listened with indignation to the latest news about the rumors circulating. He couldn't believe that David was trying to reverse the narrative. "This is absurd, Emily. You can't let him do this to you," Jake said, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her feel safe. "I know, Jake, but what can I do? He seems to have influence everywhere," Emily replied, her voice trembling but determined. "Still, I won't let this continue. I need to fight." Jake nodded, admiring her courage. "You should sue him for slander. It's the only way to show everyone who he really is," he suggested. The idea echoed in Emily's mind. Suing David could be a risky step, but also a way to reclaim her power. "You're right. Enough hiding. I'm going to do it," she affirmed, her mind already made up. The days that followed were intense. Emily met with a lawyer who guided her through the legal process. During the meetings, she felt stronger with each new piece of evidence she presented. The pain she had felt had turned into a fierce determination. In a moment of vulnerability, she confessed to the lawyer, "I just want people to know the truth. I want David to face the consequences." The day of the trial arrived, and Emily was nervous but determined. She entered the courtroom with her head held high, surrounded by friends and supporters. Jake was there, his encouraging gaze following her. The judge, a man with a stern appearance, watched closely as the witnesses were called. David, on the other hand, seemed nervous and defensive. As he heard the evidence, the judge began to realize the manipulation that had taken place. When it was Emily's turn to testify, she stood up, feeling the weight of the words that were about to leave her mouth. "I'm not here just to talk about the betrayal," she began, her voice firm. "I'm here to talk about the emotional manipulation I experienced. David made me believe I was the one to blame, that I was wrong for feeling what I felt." Her words echoed in the room, and the judge watched her attentively. "I was deceived, and I can't let him destroy my life with lies. What he did is not just betrayal, it's an attempt to erase me." When the trial ended, the judge withdrew to deliberate. The anxiety hung in the air. Emily held Jake's hand, who whispered, "You're amazing, no matter what happens." After some time, the judge returned. "After hearing the evidence presented, I rule in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant will be fined a significant amount for slander and defamation." The words echoed like a victory anthem for Emily. She had not only won the legal battle, but also reclaimed her worth and dignity. With the judicial victory, Emily felt as if a new life lay before her. She organized a new art exhibition, an event that symbolized her freedom and renewal. Jake was by her side, supporting her in every detail, and when the day came, the gallery was filled with friends and admirers. Emily smiled, surrounded by smiles, laughter, and applause. True love wasn't just about finding another person, it was about finding herself. The future was bright ahead of her, and she knew that, regardless of everything, she had the strength to move forward. Now, think about the surprises life has brought you, those that changed your path in an unexpected way. What have you learned from these experiences? Maybe it's time to reflect on whether something that feels uncomfortable now could actually be an opportunity for growth. What does this story teach you about being aware of what's happening around you? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts, and click on the video that's appearing on your screen now. In my opinion, this is one of the best stories I've ever told. And if you enjoyed the one you just heard, you'll undoubtedly love this other story as well. So subscribe to the channel, click on the video on your screen now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.